Another foray into Asia this week for the Mariners and Sky Blues, but 0 points between the two of them leaves for disappointing reading. It wasn't all bad though. The Mariners had their moments against Kevin Muscat's Shanghai Port that just had the edge of quality across the pitch that punished Central Coast with exceptional efficiency. Mikhail Docker tried his best to drag his team back towards a point, but it wasn't to be. There were plenty of high spirits in the tunnel when tall guy Arslan greeted every single player in the Sky Blue starting 11. Unfortunately, feelings must have turned sour somewhere out on the pitch before an attempted headbutt on Leo Senna. Arslan had the last laugh on the day, but the Sky Blues were in it all the way and have their chance for revenge in a few weeks' time. The A-League teams are in, headlines by the return of Matthew Leckie right in time for the Melbourne Derby as we look ahead to round 2 on this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. My name is Lachlan Avil and joining me tonight is Christian Montegan. Christian, everything was quite friendly with Tolga when he was talking to the team before the game, but as soon as they got out on the pitch, it seems like he'd forgotten all about his time in Australia.
Yeah, the mentality all changed, didn't it? It was quite a weird scuffle, wasn't it? Like, it was just so random. It was like we just didn't understand the crux of what actually happened there. So there must have been just a bit of, argy-bargy, a bit of an argument there. But that's just all part of the competitive spirit, really. And then, when you're playing in Asia, the competition just enhances, doesn't it? So, that was pretty fascinating to witness.
Does. Robbie Thompson mentioned on the broadcast, one of the scuffles between the two happened right after Senna dragged him 3 or 4 times. And Robbie was saying maybe Tolga Arslan's not just too happy with being rung around a little bit, Jacob Stevens.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Senna looks like a tremendous player, almost sort of a Tolga Arslan type of player in the midfield, just how good he is on the ball for Sydney. And it's, a really, sort of threatening sign from the Sky Blues to, I think, the rest of the A-League that this is what we can do. And they didn't quite get the result that they would have wanted. But for especially that first 20, 25 minutes, they were absolutely on it and they were completely on top of the game. And it's an amazement that they didn't actually go ahead at that point.
It is. It was a disappointing, week overall because it is 0 AFC competition ranking points, as I like to continuously remind everyone on the board for Australia. Sydney FC and the Mariners both going down to their Chinese and Japanese opponents respectively. As much as there were 2 losses, Christian, there actually were plenty of bright spots, and particularly in the Sydney FC game as well. Ironically, that game against Sanfrecce in the Champions League 2, that was really the bigger matchup and the higher quality game compared to the Mariners in the Champions League Elite. But losses are losses. And in terms of the numbers on the page, it leaves definitely the Mariners in a precarious position towards the bottom of the elite table, and then Sydney with some catch-up work to do in their group.
Yeah, so just touching on Sydney first, coming to this game, and the same with the Mariners can be said. Both of them, I don't think, would have expected to get anything really from the game, maybe a point, but to get 3 points away from home against Sanfrecce and Shanghai Port respectively was going to be a massive task. So I think, speaking of Sydney first, I think for them, the real goal was how are we going to perform, how are we going to improve, in Asia, because we've seen, obviously, the opening round, they performed really well against the Wanderers, showed a lot of promising signs, and you could probably argue that they deserve to take the lead before Sanfrecce scored that wonder goal. It was fantastic technique for that first goal. A lot of chances. They hit the post halftime stoppage time. Before that, they had a few other opportunities. Douglas Costa threatening once again on that wing with the crosses he put into the box. Look, incredibly dangerous. And just the interchange between Costa, Lolly. Costa was playing out on the right a bit. That's where actually a lot of the danger came from with those crosses into the area. But in the end, Sydney, with that defensive mistake in the second half to make it 2-0, I think it was Hayden Matthews who gave the ball away cheaply. And you can ill afford to make those mistakes. And the same happened with the Mariners conceding after 90 seconds. You've got to stamp your authority in the game. You've got to get a foothold into the contest. Otherwise, you go 1-0 down after 2 minutes. It's catch up from there. And the Mariners, from what I've seen these past few games in Asia, they've really struggled to, set the tone in the early stages. And, in the second halves of the games, they've looked really well. They've looked actually comfortable. And even against Shanghai, they took the game to them, even in the first half where Shanghai's defense was sitting deeper and deeper as the half progressed. And you thought, okay, the Mariners are onto something here. But then it's just those half chances that they just failed to convert. And it just kills them, because then Shanghai in the second half go towards the end, they hit them on the counter attack, and the quality just shows in the end. So yeah, I messaged Vinny Arado, one of the Aussie assistants for Shanghai, and he admitted that the Mariners play really well. But I said to him, like, you could tell the quality was just there, the talent just shone through in the end. So all in all, I think it was more positives to take for the Mariners than they did. Then they performed against the Victory, because we thought it was really dour before that red card. They didn't really show any life whatsoever. And then, yeah, for Sydney, I think if they play similar to that against the Sanfrecce side away from home, if they take that to the A-League for the rest of the season, yeah, they're going to be extremely difficult to break down and beat.
Yeah, absolutely. It did feel like fine margins, Jacob, was a theme of both of these games. And just when you have that step up in quality to Asia, and you can throw Sanfrecce into that mix as well, because they are a team that's sitting top of J1. They would be competing well in the Champions League elite if they were there. You know, it's all about those moments. And you think about those two Douglas Costa balls that came in for Ryan Grant, one across the face, one slams into the post. Mikhail Docker, he scored a wonder goal, but then the ball that goes in for Quol, could he get it just a slight touch on that and make it 2-2? Those slight opportunities that maybe our Australian sides missed, but just the quality of these Asian opposition, they take those chances, and they just seem to do that with such consistency, which demonstrates the step up in quality that we're dealing with.
Yeah, and it's just one of those vagaries of the game of football, right? In that typically it's the most efficient team that's going to win. They might not play the best football, they might not be the most dominant, but if you take your chances, even if you only create one chance, if you take it and you score, bang, that's it. It's on the opposition now to fight back to get the result. And it's something that, we sort of praised MacArthur for doing throughout the preseason, and what we expect them to do for the rest of the season is to be really efficient in front of goal, not waste chances. And we saw that in the Perth game, right? I mean, it felt like every chance that they created, they finished. And yes, they created a lot of chances, but they still put them all in the back of the net. That's the sort of thing, like you're saying, Lockie, that you need to be able to do if you want to win in these sorts of competitions where you're coming up against teams that have stronger squads, have more money, just are bigger, better sides than you are. You need to take your chances, and you need to, make sure that you're creating enough to stay in the game. And I think that both sides probably did that, to be honest. Like you said, it's those missed opportunities that they come to rue, and it's little mistakes that are the reason they're conceding goals. And, that's one of the core fundamentals of football is you've got to get rid of those simple mistakes, right? You've got to do the simple things well. If you're nailing the simple things, then you've got a strong base to build upon. And I think that in these two games that we saw, both Sydney and the Mariners probably weren't doing the fundamentals 100% correctly. And that's why they didn't quite get those results. I mean, the Mariners, obviously, they were more inconsistent, had good patches, and then sort of fell away for a bit, whereas I think Sydney controlled the game a bit more and for longer periods of time as well. But then it's like, Hayden Matthews, right, with that mistake in possession, where it's like, it's just simple little things like that you've got to iron out, and that comes down to the coaching there. That's on the coaches to address these issues and to really stamp them out, and to work with the players to make sure that those sorts of things aren't happening again, because the players know they've made a mistake, right? They're not stupid. They're not thinking that, I didn't do anything wrong. It's the coach. It's on the coaching staff now to make sure that everybody's on the same page about how to move forwards and how to correct those things. So no, I'm with Christian in that. I think that, especially with Sydney, my goodness, if they continue to play like this, they are going to be nigh on unbeatable this season in the A-League. They just look so talented. That front line is incredible. The midfield with Caceres and Leo Senna is going to be just so dominant. I mean, the pair of them are fantastic on the ball. Leo Senna's just got that little something about him, that little bit of flair. We saw it with actually that tussle with Arslan, where, like you said, he sort of flicked it back and forth 3 or 4 times and turned him a couple of times, and it's like, that's those little things that can just give a spark to the midfield and to the rest of the side. Because if you see your teammate doing that, you're like, we're all over them at the moment. So
I mean, like from an analytical sense as well, he's just that player that you just can't get the ball off him. Like, he's so press resistant. Like, if you can get it into him at the base of midfield, you can trust him to fend off a player and play a good pass to release, the pipe and release the pressure. I think that's so key.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like, again, we're bringing up this Hamza Saki comparison, right? Because it's kind of similar, but in different ways, right? Where Saki would you sort of unload it through a good pass forwards, especially up towards McLaren. Leo Senna can keep the ball at his feet for a little bit longer. They're both really, press resistant, and they're both really strong central midfielders, but for slightly different reasons. But, I do sort of get the feeling that, Leo Senna's got that, he's got, with the ball at his feet, that's something about him where, like you said, he's incredibly difficult to dispossess. And, when you've got a player like that in the midfield, it just opens up so much for everybody else, because all of a sudden you are drawing two players to you every time you get the ball, just in a hope that they're hoping they can get the ball off of you, even if they can't. And that then obviously leaves space for other people, and with the sort of turns and touches that we've seen Leo Senna have, we know that he can just turn that up into the open space, and if there's a pass there, he'll make that pass. If not, he can just carry the ball forwards and continue to progress the ball. So he's going to be a really instrumental part of the Sky Blues midfield. And another player who I think as well is going to be really important for them is Anas Wahim, who just has looked pretty bloody good for the most part for Sydney so far. And with the expectations attached to Douglas Costa and Joe Lolly as well after the couple of seasons that he's had, I think that Wahim is one of those players who's going to fly under the radar a little bit, but I think going forwards he's going to be massively instrumental to the creativity in that final third. Where Senna is in the centre of the park, I think Wahim is going to be that final provider in the final third. And if he can really keep firing as he is at the moment, then it's going to be a really difficult ask for teams to try and stop that.
Yeah, good luck to anyone trying to keep a clean sheet against them. I think the substitutions are an interesting point here as well. Douglas Costa came off early in the second half. Christian, the line out of the club was that he was feeling his hamstring. Tenlai says it was just precautionary with a look to the weekend. Of course, Auckland are looking a pretty good side, so travelling away there off this break, they're going to need him firing for sure. But in terms of the players that came on as well, Adrian Segosic looked really impressive. He only had 15 minutes to do what he did. He won a free kick on the edge of the box off some nice footwork. He, of course, scored that goal, the cutback from Max Burgess, another substitute coming on. And Christian, given how strong that Sydney's starting 11 is, especially in the middle and front third, these substitutions really have to make a significant impact with the small amount of time that they're allowed if they want any look in the lineup this season.
Yeah, they do. And I think that's where the ACL too is really handy for Tele to try and experiment with some of these youngsters, because we know that basically...
Not against Sanfrecce though.
No, but like I said at the start, it wasn't really expected to get anything from it. And from that stage, Sydney were 2-0 down. So Tele, that's a good opportunity to bring a couple of the youngsters on, don't you?
Do you really think they weren't expected to get anything? Because I had completely different expectations of this game.
Away from home, I think we're underestimating a bit the quality of the Japanese league. I know Sydney are a good side. We've hyped them up a lot, but away from home, that's a very tough ask. And we know their quality, the technical ability, tactically, it's very difficult. I'm not saying that it's impossible to get anything, but if you had to choose one game where Tele thought, okay, we can afford to lose this game, it'd be this one, because the other two games, Sydney have pretty much breezed by, haven't they? So I'm just saying it from that perspective, because Sydney are expected definitely to make it through to the next round. So to give the likes of a Joel King, to give him a 15 to 20 minute run out, that's just for that squad rotation to see what they can do in case if injuries arise throughout the season. I'm just looking at it from that angle.
I take your point. I think that honestly they're at a point like if there was a big gap between the quality that Eastern and Kaya is, and then Sydney is, and then another gap to Sanfrecce, I would understand that. But I honestly think they're pretty close, those two teams, Sanfrecce and Sydney. And then we actually saw Hiroshima make some very big rotations for their game against Eastern and almost not pick up 3 points. I think they scored their third goal in injury time and won 3-2. Tolga Arsene was one of the players that didn't feature in that game. So they actually did take the risk and almost got punished for it. But I just think because Sydney, their front four, and then you add in, as you say, Jacob, those two base midfielders, it's one of the best front fours that an A-League team has ever seen.
It's insane.
And so if anyone's going to go out and win a really competitive Asian competition, because it is more competitive than the AFC Cup last year because of teams like Sanfrecce, I think it's this year. And so I was really encouraged when I saw every single one of Sydney's best players in their position start this game. So I think it's a signal of intent from Talay Jacob that they know they're a good side and they know they can bring it to some of Asia's best, including a Japanese team away from home, which they very almost got a result from.
You're 100% right that it's a statement because, I mean, we saw the Mariners last season, right? And it's not the same competition, but similar type of competition with the AFC Cup. The amount of rotation that they put into their squad sometimes where, it wasn't every week they were putting out their 100% best starting 11. Whereas, yeah, like you said here, Sydney have done that. And, I think they've got a point to prove as well with the fact that the Wanderers still sort of hold that Champions League title over their heads a little bit, as we're the only Australian club to ever do this type of thing. So I think there's that little bit added to it as well, where Sydney are going to want to win this, and they can probably feel it's, like you said, close to, if not it is their year to do it with the squad that they've got, with the football that they're playing and the opposition they're up against. There's absolutely no reason why they can't go on a run like the Mariners had last season. And it's, I think the thing with Sydney is that they know that they are going to be able to just take the wind out of opposition, right? With just how, aggressive in attack they are, just persistently putting the ball forwards into the final third. I don't know what the field tilt stats were, but I'm sure it's heavily in Sydney's favour because they're just able to, when they recover possession, it doesn't take them forever to be able to craft a move to get back forwards. They are patient in build up, sure, but it's not like they're just sitting back and happy to control possession in their own half. They want to get the ball forwards because they know their best playmakers are in that front third. So that's exactly what they do, is they try and get the ball forwards, and it just keeps the foot on the opposition's throat and doesn't let them breathe. And honestly, if they don't go on to have a really good run here, it'll be because of injuries, I reckon, to some of these key players, because with the squad that they do have, like you mentioned, Lockie, when they are starting their full starting 11, it's really a sight to see, and I think probably one of, if not the best squad in that competition.
It's frightening that how well Sydney are playing though, and to think that they've only played just a few games together, a handful, and to think, we mentioned on the live stream a couple of days ago with the Mariners how Sanfrecce were first. We checked the J League table. So Sanfrecce have played about 34 games this season. They are like right in their prime. So that's why, again, I wasn't expecting too much from this game. If it was, halfway through the season and Sydney had settled in, I'd say, okay, they can give it a real go here. But no, Sydney, regardless, should be considered one of, if not the favourites to go all the way in this competition. They definitely have a good chance.
And you're right.
I was going to say that on that point of them, being so good so early, I think that's a credit to the recruitment of the foreign players that they did sign, right? In that the quality of the players that they signed is so good that they can just gel almost instantly with anybody else who might be there. It's such an underrated quality, sort of that adaptability to be able to play with anybody. And we've seen some really, really good foreign signings in the A-League who have gone on to do amazing things in their career, but we're not very good here. And, this is not the case with the Sydney squad because they're still playing as good as we know that they can for Sydney together. And I think that, it's a testament to just how strong the mentality of the players is to be able to come into a new club, a new scenario, and just be able to go straight at it without any hesitation. And I think that, huge credit to Sydney's recruitment department for that, because they've pulled off an absolute blinder.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's the table up on your screens for you. Easton and Kaya still get to play a little later on tonight as we're recording this, but at worst, Sydney will be 3 points and a mountain of goal difference clear in second spot. But the interesting note there is that despite obviously being a win back of Hiroshima, they have the goal difference advantage. So a win in 2 weeks' time in Kogra, that's what they need. If they just get a win against Hiroshima in that game, then they'll take first spot. And then they'll go into, legs against Easton and Kai that they should be winning comfortably with the advantage. So the first spot in that group is still very much up for play. And if you can get that top spot, then you probably avoid Jeonbuk Hyundai, which is the other big team on this side of the draw. So that really sets things up nicely for them. Let's tackle the Mariners a little bit more depth. Really is mission critical now. 3 games, 0 points, barely in 11th spot on goal difference. And yes, Christian, 8 out of 12 progressed, so there is time. But every time we say that, I'm getting a little less conviction when I do. The other thing is that two of the other three teams that are currently in the bottom four, the Mariners don't actually play. So not only are they going to have to go travel away and play more teams that are good quality, but they're actually teams that are higher up on the ladder, so they have a tough draw.
Yeah, because they avoid the Korean teams.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going to be a really tough ask from here. You at least need, at least a point just to say, okay, we can, compete with these big boys. It's just the confidence levels must be so low at the moment, given the back of what they did last season, the AFC Cup, winning that treble, and then to come crashing back down to earth and say, okay, this is the highest level of competition in Asia. This is what we've got to compete with. And like I was saying before, it's not like the Mariners aren't in games. It's not like they've been playing consistently poorly. It's just these spurts of moments in games where they just shoot themselves in the foot. And that first goal, I forgot who gave the ball away, but another turnover similar to Hayden Matthews for Sydney resulted in the corner, and then they concede from the corner. It's little things like that where you can't afford to make those little mistakes. Otherwise, quality sides like Shanghai Port are going to eat those up for breakfast. So I think overall, the play, yes, it can improve. I think Mark Jackson will admit that himself. Going into the final third, there's just it lacks that spark. It lacks I don't know what's the word, the conviction. It's not really convincing at the moment. And the same it could be said in the opening game against the Victory, where they just didn't look like scoring in that first half. And even when they had that extra man advantage, still they didn't really create any clear-cut opportunities. So yeah, it's a really stark contrast from what they produced last season. Like you were very worried towards the back end of the season, previewing this season, how they're going to fare this season. And, early signs indicate that they're going to struggle a bit and they might potentially miss out on finals football in the A-League. But in terms of Asia, you try and look at the fixture list ahead and try and nitpick, potential 3 points that they can pick up. It's very difficult to put pen to paper. A couple of wins they can string together. It's going to have to be, a real dogfight to try and scrape a couple of results.
Jacob, one of the things that we've consistently praised Mark Jackson for is his versatility as a coach, and we saw them coming out with a relatively regular starting 11, but shifting around the way they were playing a little bit. So they were playing their two central defenders as the first line of build-up play, and both fullbacks were going high. It didn't really work too well. They ended up reverting back to that back three after around 10, 15 minutes, which is not inherently a bad thing because you have to try things and get them wrong to find other things that work. So it's encouraging at least that he is trying things. He's trying to figure out what kind of fixes he can look for on his side, but it still looks like he's yet to find the one that he's really settled on.
Yeah, look, it's worth giving everything a try at this point for them because nothing just seems to work for any consistent length of time. I like the back two in possession is a good idea on the face of it, right? Because you keep Mirage's high like he was even with the back three, but keep him high overlapping. Fei Zhao can come inside. Mikhail Docker moves out and becomes real winger, and Storm Roux comes inside into the midfield, and you've got that extra body there, but it just wasn't quite working for them. And I think it was just in that first phase of build up when you get used to one way of playing, and then all of a sudden, if you're Brad Tapp, for instance, was it Brad Tapp that was starting? I think it was.
Yep.
Yeah, you're used to having that outlet option to your right in Storm Roux, and all of a sudden he's not there. When you get pressed, you panic, right? Because there's a little bit going through your head of, oh, easy, I'll just turn and play it to, oh, wait, he's not there anymore. What do I do now, right? So it's, it does take a bit of time to bed this sort of stuff in. It's not as simple as just going straight out there and going, right, we're just going to play with the back two today, lads. Sort it out, figure it out yourselves. No, it'll take some time. And, it's good to see that he's trying things, but they definitely looked a lot more comfortable with the back three, and it's because it's what they're used to playing with. Especially then when in transition back into defence, it does mean that they have that extra body back. It means that, the likes of Caltac are less relied upon to cover large areas of space because the three of them can split it up more evenly. It does just make a lot more sense for the way that they want to play to have that back three. But yeah, credit to Jackson for trying the back two. And I think in general, it was an okay game for the Mariners, right? Like Christian touched upon, it was those individual moments that were the reason for the loss. It wasn't like they played terribly. They weren't great, but they weren't it was basically it was a 3-1 loss, right? They did get that goal right at the end, but for all intents and purposes, it was a 3-1 loss. I don't think they played 3-1 loss bad, but I don't think they played well enough to get a result either. And that's the thing, right? They just weren't consistently good enough going forwards to warrant it. And, they had missed chances, but if you're going to miss chances, you have to create more, and they didn't create more. So the missed chances came back to haunt them a little bit. And I think that's been their problem, is they have these periods of play where it's a good 10, 15 minutes. And one of two things happen. They either score, like they did with Mikhail Docker when he scored, right? Came towards the end of that 10, 15 minute period. And they sort of take a moment to refresh and reset, right? Because, okay, all of that pressure's gone now. We've just scored. Like, we get a chance to clear our heads and go again. Or they end up conceding and lose all of that. Everything that they've built up is all of a sudden gone because they've conceded. And that happened in this game, right? They would have a good 10, 15 minute period and then they'd concede, or they'd have a good 10, 15 minute period and then they'd score. And it was either the Mikhail Docker one where, they sort of reset afterwards and couldn't get back into it, or it's too late in the game for it to make a difference anyway. And there's no time to actually keep pushing. So it's about finding some semblance of consistency, I think, for the Mariners, even if they just dial it down a little bit so that they're a more consistent threat. They might not be as big a threat, but they're more consistent. I think that might actually help them out a little bit more, because they look more settled when they're not in those sort of cagey phases of play where they're sort of caught between, going forwards and defending and things like that, right? They do look a lot better when they're comfortable, when they're structured and when they're set. Just finding that consistency is going to be key. And I do see good things in there, but just got to make sure they're doing it more often.
So if the Mariners didn't play bad enough for a 3-1, but not good enough for a result, then maybe 3-2, somewhere in the middle. Is about fair.
That's right. That sounds about right.
It would have been such an injustice if Mariners got that equaliser right at the end. That would to be fair, that would have been so undeserved.
Yeah.
All right, there we go. The AFC competitions for the week done. Both teams will return in 2 weeks' time for the fourth match day of their respective competitions. Let's head and look towards the second round of the A-League this weekend. The teams are in. Headlines by Matthew Leckie back from injury into the Melbourne Derby. Of course, he replaces the suspended James Jago. Christian, this midfield for City could look at a number of different ways. You got Nathaniel Atkinson, who we've traditionally thought as a right back, playing in midfield the other day. Jago comes out. Ugarkovic was higher than we've usually seen him. Matt Leckie used to be a winger, but we've actually seen him last year be able to play the midfield role quite well. So it's anyone guesses really towards what Aurelio comes out with on Saturday night.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you've been obviously covering Melbourne City a bit more than I have, so I'm sure you have a bit more to add here. But I think that this suspension for Miranda with victory, I think that's going to prove critical, because I don't see where the goals from City are going to come from. And I think that the defensive breakup, I guess you suspect that Jason Gary is going to slot into the centre-back role given the lack of options that Kisnorbo has centrally. It's just a matter of, what does City have up front? We know Max Caputo's out in the false nine position. Andrew Naboot started there. Is he the answer to try and find a spark there? I just see a really cagey game in this one. It's going to be a real scrap is my prediction. It could be a 0 or a 1-0. I just don't see too much, separating these two sides. It should be entertaining nonetheless, hopefully a sellout crowd, but a couple of changes for both sides might make it a bit interesting in the first 20 minutes perhaps. Maybe we could see a couple of mistakes creep in. But other than that, I do think it's going to be a pretty cagey affair. Yeah,
the Matt Leckie puzzle piece is a really interesting one because the midfield would rotate around a lot, but we also know that Vidmar, rates him in terms of being able to slot into that 9 spot with Caputo out. I don't think that will happen this weekend, because if you did that, you'd have to move Andrew Naboo out wide and then take away Jonathan Cohen, who I actually thought both played pretty well. So I wouldn't upset that at the moment. So maybe Leckie slots into midfield and then Ugarkovic drops back into the pivot. But it's anyone's guess. Leckie could go up top and Naboo out wide. Maybe Cohen. We've heard that potentially he could be a midfielder as well, playing that central area. So I'm sure there'll be a little bit.
Could a potential formation change be in the realms of possibility, or Vidmar won't change it that way?
I don't think so. I think they just look too well drilled. Like, they have lots of little variety in terms of how they build up, but No, I think the formation for me will stay how it is. Jacob, from an Adelaide perspective, first game of the season for them, they're coming off the bye, and the big one for them, Bart Vereen's still out. So we hoped he was going to be back for Adelaide's first game. They had the bye to give him just an extra week, but it wasn't quite enough.
Yeah, it's disappointing because I still think he is going to be such a fantastic player, and he's exactly the sort of defender that Adelaide fans have been crying out for half a decade now, and they finally have him, and he's injured. And it's like, just of course,
the way you've been carrying on about him, he seems like the only fantastic player in the Adelaide
squad. But no, that's still a huge out for the Reds. And with the way that Carl Viet has set the side up with a back three, another team using a back three, surprise. It's you need a player like Vereen's in there to be able to command and control, and because they use sort of a zonal marking scheme in that back three, with whether it's Dylan Piraeus or Panache Maidana that's going to play as that right wing back, they stay high more often than not. They very rarely come back to do any defending. So it is on particularly the two centre backs, right? Ryan Kitso slots in on the left, but the two centre backs to organise that space and figure out who's doing what, who's tracking the runners, who's sweeping up behind or engaging the ball carrier or whatnot, and having somebody like Bart Vereen's with that just massive amount of experience. What was it, 200 games in the Eredivisie captaining Sparta Rotterdam, right? Like you don't get to that point without being very, very good. And that's exactly the sort of thing that United need at the heart of defence right now, and that they're not going to have. So yeah, it's a huge out. But I think that the rest of the squad actually looks pretty decent, right? Like, Adelaide have a very strong midfield unit. We've seen what Alagic and Barnett can do in the double pivot in the preseason. They've just been fantastic in just hoovering up everything in their general vicinity, recycling possession really well. And then, of course, with, attacking outlets like Stefan Mork, Zach Clough, Austin Ayubi. Who knows if it's going to be Jovanovic or Goodwin starting at striker? It could be either of them. Jovanovic has tended to be given the starting spot, but that's also because Goodwin's been injured, but he's come back, played an internal trial over the weekend, and by all accounts was really, really good in that game. So, it could be either of them that start, but it's a decent lineup outside of those defensive issues. And, we spoke about with our previews on our preview video, if you want to face the Mariners, now's a good time to do it. And, I think the big worry for Adelaide is still that defensive unit, and having Bart Vereen's in there would just shore things up so much. So there is still the chance that they do ship 4 goals, right? And it does become a difficult ask, but, it's not beyond the realm of possibility that Adelaide could grab a point, maybe even the 3 points here against what looked to be a down and out Mariners side.
In terms of the other team news around, MacArthur put out a little bit of match promo for their game against the Jets on the weekend, calling it the Rose Bowl, the battle between Liam Rose and Lockie Rose. So right on cue, we get the word that Lockie Rose is still out with injury. Perth welcome in Christian Caicedo to replace the injured Nikola Milajuznic. Wellington get Kolakovsky in, while Marco Rojas and Paulo Retre are still out of the side. Sydney will bring in either Patrick Wood or Zach De Jesus for the suspended Max Burgess. And then Western United still without Ben Garuccio as well. All right, let's get into our weekend look. We've got 3 questions for everyone. We're starting off with a burning question, and mine is going to be, what is the reception like for Patrick Kisnorbo when he enters the field, well, not the field of play, but the arena of play at Amy Park on Saturday night? It's been this kind of tension that's been bubbling for a while. I think it's good that we get to open it out in the air in round 2, and we can see what the reaction is like, because it can go one of 2 ways. Some fans will really appreciate his time there for all the success that they brought him, and then others will just purely hate the fact that he's gone to victory. And I think both are reasonable things to think. I'm just interested to find out what it is. Christian, what's your burning question?
My burning question is the response that we're going to see from Perth Glory after the 6-1 hammering they experienced against MacArthur. I think, what's their mentality like? How are they going to bounce back after such a devastating blow? The fans were on their backs yet again, and rightly so, after, the last 2 games of the season, previously of last season, they lost 7-1 to Sydney and 8-0 to Melbourne City. And then to bring this performance in, this should be a fresh slate, right? With a new coach, a new set of players, but now it's it feels like the demons have sort of been brought on from last season into this season, and you can tell through the press, the intensity it just wasn't there from the outset. So how they respond against Wellington in the distance derby, they're playing at home. Can they respond and get 3 points for their sake? Because if they produce another disappointing performance like they did against MacArthur, then I think serious questions are going to be asked.
Jacob?
Mine is, speaking of MacArthur, can MacArthur continue that insane goal scoring form that they had? They're coming up against the Newcastle Jets, who, look, how do I put it nicely?
Put it nicely.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of us have them predicting to finish very near the bottom, if not on the bottom of the table this season. It's a chance to continue, sort of the standard that they've set, create lots of good chances, finish the chances that they do create. I'm hoping for my fantasy team's sake that it does happen and Jakalish has another cracker. But are MacArthur suddenly this big goal scoring team that sort of came out of nowhere after a cup run where they were really sort of conservative and, were just going for that 1 or 2 goals that they needed. All of a sudden they're free scoring. Is this all just a mirage, or are they actually this team?
All right. Next up, worst case scenario. And for me, I'm going to say that my worst case scenario is that coming off the Sydney derby and then heading down to Tarnia, Juan Mata goes, "Oh no, what have I done?" and wants to go home. Obviously, the Western United are building towards something out there. It's going to be great when they have it, but it's not there yet. So I just hope that Juan Mata can have a little holiday out to the west of Melbourne and come back and return to Wanderers the following week.
Imagine Mata just looking there, seeing this small crowd of people in the field in the middle of nowhere, saying, "What have I done?" Honestly,
he subs himself off after 60 minutes and just keeps walking. He's gone straight to the airport.
Christian, what's your worst case scenario?
Worst case to me is if the derby isn't sold out. Given the hype around that round 2. I know last season the first Melbourne derby, I believe, was a sellout, but I think there was like 4,000 or 5,000 empty seats. You know how they say it's a sell and then it doesn't really in the end. There's always empty seats.
Yeah,
so I really want to see,
right?
Yeah. That's all. Everyone has to explain on social media how it works. But I'm not expecting every seat to be sold out. But just I really want a good turnout here. Obviously Patrick Kisnorbo, you touched on that narrative, Lockie. I think it'll just be just a juicy storyline, and it should be an entertaining affair. Even though I did say before it will be a bit cagey, that's not to say that that there should be goals in this one. So no, hopefully it won't be an empty stadium, which I'm sure it won't be.
Jacob?
Mine is my worst case scenario is that one of Adelaide United's other centre backs gets injured. Then what? So I think that's a sentiment that a lot of Adelaide fans would echo.
Okay, we're gonna have to put a ban at some point about talking about our own teams, just to get a little bit of variety. Anyway, finally, it is a ping from distance, so a speculative kind of prediction from outside the box. Every once in a while is going to land. And for me, it's that Perth Glory responding straight away against Wellington. Chiefy's talked about the fact that Marco Rojas and Paulo Retre are very key players in terms of the system that he wants to play this year. It's the OG distance derby, so they have to fly a long way. And Perth have got a lot of young players who will definitely want to make an impression. So hopefully the effort is there. And maybe, if the perfect storm comes together, then they can respond potentially. Christian?
Mine is Auckland City to back up their win against Brisbane and defeat Sydney at home.
Who?
Auckland?
Auckland City? The FIFA Club World Cup team?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, sorry, Auckland FC.
Wrong team.
I always get it mixed up. Auckland FC. No, mine's Auckland FC to bounce back. Not to bounce back to I've lost my train of thought now. Start again. No, my tip is Auckland to back up their win from Brisbane Roar and then defeat Sydney FC this week at home again. I just feel like the short turnaround for Sydney coming off that trip to Japan and might perhaps play a bit of an effect on them. Because Auckland, we saw the crowd last week. It was pretty good to see, wasn't it? Hopefully we get the same turnout there. And Steve Corica as well, obviously facing his former side. He has a lot of history there and success with Sydney. So that'll be another good narrative there. So My hot tip is Auckland to get another 3 points. It'd be a bit of an upset though.
Jacob, what's your ping?
I don't know how speculative this is, but I reckon that Western United are going to have the biggest crowd that they've ever had outside of an Amy Park game. So including when they played in Ballarat and now in Tony and stuff, right? I think that they're going to have the biggest crowd that they've had. And, there's big draw cards, obviously. Juan Mata, they've got a petting zoo. That's huge. People are going to love that. I love that. I think that they're obviously the club that people are still talking about, the crowd numbers. I don't know. Maybe they'll shut the critics up and have a good showing here, and I really hope they do. And that's sort of my little guess at what might happen. Yeah,
that would be good. What do you reckon has more pull? The petting zoo at Tarnia or the slide at Go Media Stadium, which is getting more attention?
That's such a tough one.
You have to say the slide, probably. The zoo.
Well, I heard there is a rumor going around that Piney could be sent down the slide on the broadcast this week, so that would be fun to see.
That would be that.
Can we get Archie Thompson in the petting zoo? Is there feeding the Paramount goat? How good would that be? Okay.
That'd be so good.
That would be great. All right. Before we sign off, I want to give a shout out as well to the APL and the A-Leagues for the massive influx of content and shows and videos that we've had over the past few weeks. It's been really, really good. Plenty of variety. Not all of it is for everyone, but that's a good thing. If you're a hardcore, then there's almost one a day coming out of the A-Leagues at the moment for you to go in and watch. And if you're not, then you can pick and choose what your favourite is. They've got the highlight show that's narrated by James Dodd. They've got A-Leagues downloaded, hosted by Max Rushton with Archie Thompson and Thomas Sorensen as well, which is more of a lighthearted reflection on the fixtures and a little bit of jokes and banter in there as well. Then you've got Total A-Leagues with Vince Rigari and Tommy Orr, which is my personal favourite. It's much more of a news and current affairs program as much as sport can be, which is quite similar to what we're trying to do. So if you like our show, you're definitely going to like Total A-Leagues. You've got specific video match previews with James Dodd and Tommy Orr as well. They go and spend a few minutes on every game and they're put up on socials. And then you got the A-Leagues warm-up as well with Nick Stoll and Daniel Georgievski, which dropped on Thursday. Marketed as a alternate preview show, which is about a quick 5 minutes, good for a laugh. If you're a fan of the Make Australia Fun Society, then you'll enjoy that one as well. So, Christian, I think it's just so good that finally fans have a wide array of content to choose from. You got Paramount doing their own stuff as well with the weekly kickoff, and was it Football Tonight? Is the Gap show on the Saturday broadcast? So, so much more content coming out. There's some more independents showing up on the scene as well. It's really good.
Yeah, it's good to have just that bit of a variety, because in seasons past, if you have the one or two shows, it's, if fans aren't, keen on one aspect, just like the comedy, for example, that 5-minute segment, or they want a more in-depth analysis and preview of games, you've got a bit of everything. So that's where it's good for fans. They can, pick their choosing. And it's obviously great for the league. And we want it to continue to grow and have as much content as possible to help grow the game here.
Absolutely. And Jacob, speaking of launching new content, we at Ramble Australia are very proud to announce, of course, the launch of the Dubcast, which is very exciting. This is a show that will be hosted by Paletti and is a weekly look at exclusively Australian women's football. If you listen to the Wednesday episodes of this show last season, it was essentially the same thing. That's what that will be, just one show dedicated to the A-League women's. Matildas will be featured on there. We'll still talk about the Tillies here and there, but we'll leave the meat of it for the Dubcast crew. Episode 1 is out on YouTube and Spotify, and soon to be on Apple Podcasts and all the others. I still need to get to that. But dedicated brand, dedicated face, and dedicated contributors as well, which is cool. Giving the women's game the attention it deserves.
Yeah, and I don't want to be that person, but I think we're the first to get to dub content so far. So
are we?
I think we might be. So that's always good. But if Paletti as host isn't a big enough draw card, then I don't know what's going to be, because they are gonna. But I think they had. I haven't listened to the full episode, but I believe there was a segment where they just discussed The Simpsons for
that was like the opening 5 minutes.
Was it the opening? So there you go. That's what you can expect. It's going to be a fantastic listen every week.
Yeah, it would. Look, I listened through it to edit it, and it was I was laughing a lot.
Yeah.
And Paletti, Burke, and Marissa, who was the guest on for the first episode, they're all very knowledgeable and they had a good time whilst doing it. So if you're interested in the women's game, episode 1, the dubcast, it'll be linked on all our socials and our website as well. So go check it out. But that will do for this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. A little bit shorter than we've been doing recently. We just wanted to run a few tests, see how people are reacting to the different episode lengths, and we'll decide what the best plan forward is. But Christian Montegan, thanks for coming on today.
Appreciate it, mate.
Jacob Stevens as well, thank you.
Thank you very much, Lockie.
We will be back on Tuesday to review another round of the A-League football. How good does it feel to hear that? Thank you all very much for listening at home. We'll see you then. Goodbye.